What's going on YouTube? Today I'll be talking about why the King of the Apes seems to draw in more people than the King of the Monsters. Stay tuned. Welcome one, welcome all, Zimzilla, and you and every other Godzilla fan is probably either angry, confused, or probably a mix of both right now, considering I would make such a claim. I mean, King Kong more popular than Godzilla, I'm either capping or wildin', or
Because you are capping or wilding. Anyways, I found this video from my recommendation about why King Kong is more popular than Godzilla. Straight up, I'm gonna tell you, he's a lot more popular.
But throughout the GVK hype train, the idea of King Kong being the more popular monster to the average person was anecdotal, but in a way taken as gospel. In most discussions about who would win, there would be at least one person telling you that his friends weren't kaiju fans, but they knew who King Kong was and they were wanting him to win in the upcoming film. This isn't necessarily unfounded. Watch through any GVK reaction video or live stream either on Twitch or YouTube and you'll find a lot of people rooting for Kong, while often stating that Godzilla was stronger, and of course making the same claims I just made.
People rooted for Kong because he was clearly the underdog of the fight, and people like seeing the underdog win. Biggest example is Rocky. Even though he didn't win the fight, he won the hearts of the audience.
But without the preamble out of the way, I want to give a few points as to why I believe in some ways it is true that King Kong is more popular to Godzilla to the average person. As an ape monster, Kong is able to express emotions that can be read much easier by the viewer. Whether it's anger, pain, wonder, and happiness, these are all feelings we experience, and seeing it expressed through a creature we are naturally close to allows audiences to be drawn in by Kong and what he's feeling. On the other hand, Godzilla being a reptile is not able to express these emotions in the same way as us or Kong, although Godzilla can also express anger, pain, wonder, and happiness, but he does them in a way that's not the same as an ape or us.
I do get how King Kong appeals to other people by being more emotive the way humans are, but I don't see how that equates to how he's more popular than Godzilla, like, at all. People also like inhuman monsters like Cthulhu, the Xenomorphs, Predators, dragons in general. They're all inhuman, and that's famous for being otherworldly to humans. I'm sorry. I have the China virus, and just add in that clip of Jobby saying it, please.
Between Godzilla and Kong, the former has far more films than the latter, with 36 to 12, with one of those not even having the original Kong in that film, and which shows it's not much better with Kong's 3 to Godzilla's 6. But if there's one thing that can be said for Kong, it is that his sparse film appearances, coupled with him being referenced in other pieces of media a lot, gives him a more consistent theming. Like, I mean, for real, a giant ape living on an island worshipped by natives who steals a girl, fights other creatures, and is finally brought to New York before being shot from a building. You see this referenced a lot, even if it's not trying to parody King Kong, this kind of storyline appears again and again in other pieces of media. And with Godzilla, well, I mean, he's a dinosaur usually, mutated from the atomic bomb, or he was awakened by it. Sometimes we don't even know if he really is a dinosaur. There was that one time he was an underworld were-crocodile reject, and then other times he's always been there, and then another time he got raised from the dead, and then another time they wanted to have him come from space, and then there was another time he was an Atlantean bioweapon, and another time we wanted to make this. It's very clear from Godzilla's filmography, the ones that have come out and scrapped ideas, that the character has become relatively malleable in how he looks and how he is characterized. Everything outside of his name is able to be changed, and with each creative looking to make their mark on the character, it's safe to say you're going to see a lot of variation. I mean, between 2014 and 2021, only 3 years longer than that of the Millennium series, we've seen 4 distinct Godzillas, 5 if you count the Godzilla Universal ride, and each has cultivated a diehard fanbase when it adheres to one of these being the penultimate or platonic ideal of a Godzilla, and this can always cause a lot of debate as to whether Godzilla should be portrayed in this way or portrayed in that way. Even the Millennium series that had a reboot almost every other film, there are a lot of Godzillas within that generation that are pretty similar. Taking the 2000 Godzilla, Kiryu Saga Godzilla, and Final Wars Godzilla, you can swap them around with other Godzillas like the one from Megaguirus and Final Wars to Kiryu Saga, and outside of some minor differences, the character is not really going to change much in terms of the story overall.
I'll take incoming and maybe a more in-depth video about this, but Godzilla works best as a plot device. With some exceptions, Godzilla has almost always been a plot device to drive the main characters forward. He pushes the narratives and the themes the writer is trying to tell from their stories.
On the other hand, the last time Kong saw another adaptation besides his MonsterVerse version on the big screen was 16 years ago, in the last animated venture being 5 with Kong King of the Apes. And looking at the '05 film and King of the Apes respectively, the film goes to great lengths to preserve the spirit of the original. While the other is so far removed from Kong in setting and tone that most Kong fans ignore its existence or actively decry it, like Big Jack did in one of his more hilarious videos. But it's a trend. Films like The Mighty Kong that may be kinda faithful but don't respect the source material, or new ideas like King of the Apes or the animated series and films from the early 2000s, show that most Kong fans prefer it when Kong sticks to his original storyline and therefore his original characterization. Inversely, Godzilla's errors and interpretations make what and who he is different to so many people and pop culture as a whole. There's so many people you can think of, probably personally from your own fandom experiences, having a wholly different feeling about Godzilla to you in terms of design and characterization, to the point it could be considered that there are so many different denominations of what Godzilla's true characterization is to all the people who like him. And as I brought up, when people think of Kong, it's not just the character, but the story of the original that comes with that recollection, essentially condensing the myth. Well, with Godzilla, it's usually vaguely describing him and how he is destroying buildings, or maybe he's fighting something. It's always going to vary depending on the person who's talking about it, while with Kong, it's usually pretty standard. Ironically enough, however, in recent years we've come to see traits of Godzilla become more consolidated, one of these being his name coming from an island god, sometimes directly stated to be Odo Island, this appearing in the Polygon prequel books, Shin and Singular Point, and his behavior as a destructive antagonistic force towards humanity is shared between the Polygon films, Shin and Singular Point. The really only exception to this being the MonsterVerse films, although Godzilla is becoming more and more antagonistic now, though the significance of the Oxygen Destroyer has appeared in both the MonsterVerse and Singular Point universes, so that's a point of similarity there. And finally, Godzilla evolving on screen has happened twice now, and it may be something that might be a trend that ends up sticking for a while more. And although I left it out in the original talk about unique Godzillas, but the universal Godzilla in a way is the most pop culture version of the character, it just being a big, greenish, spiky dinosaur in a city destroying stuff and fighting other monsters shooting blue fire. We don't really get a story in that ride, and in a way it just encompasses all that the public generally knows about Godzilla, even including King Ghidorah, his most famous adversary to fight him. Overall, while Kong has stayed in his lane in terms of what his films do and don't, and those that stray too far tend to be forgotten or ignored even by his most ardent fans, Godzilla branches out far more, and this causes him to stray in terms of character. And with a lot of implicit bias against the character intrinsically, or explicitly due to apathy for it, it makes sense as to why Kong appears to be much more popular to the average person.
Godzilla branching out makes him even more popular due to him being able to branch off to specific genres that appeal to specific people. I feel like Godzilla is more known for its themes. The most obvious one is nuclear power and its destruction in its wake. You don't go for a roller coaster ride for a story. You go for a roller coaster ride to turn your brain off and have fun. Overall, what do we learn? Just use Google.